the best way I can describe it is when you bring together an event, you're bringing together people, and you're all sharing an idea. Now, people who are coming, they're having their own ideas, but if your goal is to try to get everybody under the same idea and participate, that's where all the work comes in. And so, you know, you've got to hit it on multiple fronts, and you have to be very sort of transparent in the way that you go about doing it, and you have to be willing to include others and not be, you know, what's the word, authoritarian in your approach, you know. So, you know, what started off as an idea for us has become a collaborative effort amongst them, you know, Daybreak and celebrities and Caesars and Facebook, and everybody has sort of come in to do something different. And you know, what it was people want something different in esports. They don't know what, right? But they know that the way that it's been needs to continue to evolve forward. And there's an intrinsic understanding that players have to be more important than just being customers. Mm-hmm. But how do you do that? Like, whose job is it to really do that? And for the most part, the industry has just looked to video game publishers to do that job. And that's not their job. Their job is to make a game and sell it, man. That's like, more power to them. They do a good job of that, right? But so really until Twin Galaxies sort of comes along, which its job is to recognize players, regardless of game, regardless of, you know, and say, hey, you achieved something. That core idea starts there, and then that just starts expanding into the event that you're seeing. Okay, so in order to understand how Twin Galaxies is helping Daybreak, you have to understand what the natural ecosystem is in gaming and how it's been. It's been publishers, right? Developers, the customer, and then you have game media. That's it. That's the universe. So in that universe, where is the player, right? It doesn't really exist. It's a concept, but the player is the customer is the player. All right. So when Twin Galaxies steps forward, it's not a publisher, it's not a developer, it's not what is it, right? It's this governing body that authenticates achievement in video gaming, right? Okay, well, what is that? Well, it's actually a very valuable and important service that we take for granted in all of sports, with all of the sports statistics and all that other stuff that just doesn't exist. Okay, so what does Twin Galaxies bring to the table? Well, if you're a publisher and you want your product to become an esport, what are your choices? You have to do it yourself. You have to figure it all out yourself, invest your own money into it, then call up a tournament operator like an ESL who can put on a show, an event for you under your direction, right? And they'll add whatever they can add to it. But they're certainly not going to put money into that, right? It's your thing. And then that's your only option. So if you're a publisher, it's a big, giant marketing expense, and you're doing the math and you're going, well, if I spend this much money, how much am I going to get back on my game sales? Twin Galaxy shows up and says, we have another option for you. How about you let us make that investment, you let us do all of those things, and you just worry about making the game. But you have to agree not to interfere or create problems for a naturally existing league to function, right? Because again, a league like that isn't there just to sell video games as its sole point of existence. A league like this is there to allow player achievement and player recognition and fandom to take place, right? It's a very different animal. That option just never existed until Twin Galaxies turned its attention and said, we're going to invest in that, we're going to do that. And that is a tremendous offering to any publisher. It takes the load off, it takes all of the investment and the thinking off of it, and they can stay focused on what they're good at. And Twin Galaxies can stay focused on what it's good at, which is the governance of such a thing. I would say it's incredibly important. The genre is exploding, and it's incredibly important that the right foundational pieces are laid now, so that the genre can really live up to its full potential. So constructing a league in the economic model of traditional sports is so essential for the entire. It sets the tone for the entire genre. We have a governance committee, right, where you have the publisher, and you have Twin Galaxies, and you have a commissioner, and then you have the player representation, and then you have a team representation. So there's 5 of them, right? All of them have equal votes. So that is, once you go that way, you can't ungo that way, right? And it sets the tone for how a Battle Royale league should operate. That kind of relationship doesn't exist in any other esports league, not by a long shot. It's all the publisher. Just they control everything, right? They're God in this. Here now you have this collaborative team who is going to constantly be looking at the product they're making, which is the show, the broadcast itself, like the NFL puts on the football game. And they're going to make decisions as to what's going to be best, not only for the players and the teams, but for the viewing audience. Which is all important. They got to be part of it too, right? Well, look, the goal is to make it as inclusive as possible for the viewer. And, it starts with having a game that can be easily understood in concept right out of the gate, right? And that's why H1Z1 is such a perfect game for that, because the minute you look at it, you go, oh, I recognize a police car and a cabin and a tree and a person. There's no fantasy magic flying all over the place, and you know what I mean? So that's the good start. But then after that, all the effort goes into how do you make it as digestible of an entertainment experience for the uninformed as possible, so that you're not. That's been always a big problem. All esports has always been is just players watching players for the sake of entertaining players. That's not very inviting to someone who doesn't know anything. This is the opposite effort, right? Where the developer has worked to create spectating modes that we can use so that we can show the game in the simplest way possible. A scoring system that's super simple for people to understand. The information on the screen, like where all of the teams stand and the points, always there, just like real sports. This is the best. We're not creating anything new here. This is the part that should just blow your mind, right? All we have to do is look at what sports does and just do what they do. The game space has just long time refused to do that. They want to do it their way for their purpose of being player focused for players' sake, for only players that are watching, so they can sell more games. That has nothing to do with what you actually need to do to create an entertaining sports broadcast. So all we're doing, for the layman, they're not going to notice that we did anything. They're going to go, well, of course, that's how it's supposed to look. That's how it's supposed to be. That's how it's been. I've watched basketball. I've watched hockey. This is exactly that. I don't understand what the big science here is, right? That's ultimately what. But, from the game perspective, oh my God, you're doing it this way. Why would you can't do it that way? That doesn't. Of course, it makes sense. It's already right there, and so we're just applying what is known and has worked and what people expect in the rest of the world to esports. So this is really the first esport that anyone should be able to watch, immediately understand, not feel intimidated, not feel like they have to go play the game, right, or in order to appreciate it. And we basically move the game to the back. It's the hockey puck, it's the football, it's the basketball. Great, it's got to be there, it's important. But really, it's the players that you want to pay attention to, that you want to learn about, that you want to be invested in, that you want to know the emotional state of. Let's bring all of that forward, which is what all sports does. That's what they do. it's here now with Battle Royale, and I think it's critically important that we lay that foundation now in the genre. So we set that expectation with the audiences so that no one later can get away with creating something that is so niche or so self-focused that it sort of ruins the opportunity for wider acceptance and wider understanding. Well, you know, it took, what, H1Z1 more than 2 years in early access being played heavily in order to get refined to the point where criticisms of the game are all about the various nuances as opposed to broad sweeping, the game crashed, doesn't work, right? It's taken that long. So it finally reached that point where it was ready. But just like any sport, there's still going to be a continued evolution of refinement that has to take place. And now that the game is really being treated like a sport, the refinements that will be made are in service to the audience. They're in service to the player. They're not going to be in service to selling copies. You know, they're not going to make changes that cause a player who's invested 10,000 hours of practice time to lose all that value. That won't happen anymore, right? But it's taken years to get to that place, and so really, you know, H1Z1 is arguably the oldest original Battle Royale game, so it has the most experience sort of welded into it. So it's natural for it to be the first one with a Pro League because it's moved to that point in its life cycle where it can warrant that. Well, okay, so the whole player base question is sort of a loaded, publisher-driven statistic. So you have publishers that are always trying to sell their games, and so they bring forward certain statistics culturally that make everybody start to care about it. Like, hey, we sold this many game copies. Hey, this many people are playing our game right now. And then from those statistics, the industry tries to derive what the opportunities are from it. So I'll give you an example of how this logic can really fail. The video game industry will look at a game and say, well, here's how many people are playing it right now and how many copies they sold. Based on that, they will determine whether it could be an esport, like all the various opportunities that could come from that based on that number. If you take that same logic and you say, well, okay, how many footballs did we sell? And how many people right at this second are actively playing football? You'd come up with a number, and that number would then try to translate to what the opportunity is, and that opportunity would not be the $30 billion football NFL industry. It just will not translate that. You'd come to a calculation like, oh, there could be something here, but it's, you know, let's focus on something that everyone bought, like, you know, I don't know, a pet rock, whatever it is. So when we're looking at, you know, how many people are currently playing the game, you can look 11 million people or something like that has downloaded H1Z1, right? So you can look at those things, but that's not really what the point is. What's the total concurrency for Jeopardy right now, right? 3 people playing. But how many people are watching it? How many people know about it? Or American Ninja Warrior, right? How many people are training to be Ninja Warriors in those elaborate backyards that they build, right? It's a very limited number, and yet you have millions and millions of people who totally appreciate it and love watching it and want to be part of that sort of culture and community. The rules of entertainment are universal. The game industry would like to pretend that they're not in certain ways, because that narrative is driven by publishers. And God bless them, they're good at that. That's what their job is. It's not a criticism. That's what they do. So what we are looking at is the game, if you look at all the games that are out there, what games naturally lend themselves to just people understanding? You almost have to go back into like the early 80s and pull up Pac-Man and stuff like that, where you get to the point where people can just look at it and know what's happening, right? H1Z1 is one of the rare just games unto itself. That's something you can build a nice sort of sports foundation on. Yes, there's 11 million people on this who've downloaded. Certainly people are playing the game, but as new Battle Royale games come out, as in all video games, everyone dogpiles onto the latest, newest. Everyone dogpiles onto the latest. That cycle just keeps going. The question is, what happens after that initial romance? In most games' lifespans, after that romance, the game's over. That's it. But that's not how sports can be. Sports not sports. If that's the cycle of games, eSports is doomed. Because it's always gonna, I mean, 30 years ago, you could play basketball. Right? In 30 years, can you play League of Legends? We're gonna see, right? We'd like to say, in 30 years, can you play H1Z1 Battle Royale? Yeah, because it's a sport. It's stayed, right? So there's a lot of attributes that go into that. Certainly, we think there's more people in the world who do not know what Battle Royale is, who do not know what H1Z1 is, than do. Okay, so even if all we do is expose more and more people, the first thing they see is H1Z1. You think it's cool, it's Battle Royale. Oh well, I'll try that. It's a free game. It's free to play, right? So certainly, success in our depiction of this Pro League can lend itself to success or greater adoption of people trying the game, right? As a side effect. That's not necessarily the league's goal. Certainly that would be the Daybreak's goal in being involved with the league. There's nothing wrong with that. But yeah, I mean, we would want to see and hope to see more new faces. Not trying to fight with all the people who already played the game a bunch and they moved on to the next game and somehow you try to bring them back. That's not what the goal is. The goal is there might be 11 million people in the world who know what H1Z1 is, but there's about 6 billion others who don't. Do you think there's another 11 million people out there who might find this interesting and want to engage? Probably. That's why we have a distribution partner like Facebook instead of, say, Twitch. The Twitch audience is great. Twitch is great at what it does, but it's a closed audience. It's the informed gaming audience. They've already played H1Z1 to death, right? And now they're moving to whatever it is. The Facebook audience is much wider, right? This is how you can reach new audiences, new people with with ideas and have them participate. And we're trying to make that easier and easier. So it's just a different proposition, and we don't try to fall into sort of the more narrow band, hardcore gaming perspective. Mm-hmm. I think that there is a saturation point for mass audience stuff, and so there's going to be some limit there. But I think smaller communities, there really is no limit for how many smaller community esport things can. Just like it's like there's darts, right? Like there's a lot of sports out there that don't necessarily get the premium, NFL type treatment, but it's pretty extensive. I mean, there's a lot of them, right? So I look at the video game category in a very similar way, and I think it always comes down to, is this particular sport, whether it's a game or whatever, digestible to a wider audience from an understanding standpoint. Most games, just like it's like even in sports, not so much.
That was really good.
Right? It's hard to watch croquet, right? It's fun to play, right? But watching the croquet championships can be hard for a lot of people.
Sure.
And that would be the same thing as maybe, trying to watch, I don't know, like the Flappy Bird champion. I don't know, maybe the Flappy Bird champions would be pretty fun to watch.
Sounds pretty fun.
Right?
I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah.